This is Morality as a System of Hypothetical Imperatives by Philippa, who is a very famous philosopher, and this is from Philosophical Review from 1972. So this is a classic paper, and as always, I am just reviewing this. I am not endorsing it. We see if it's any good. Usually, there's not anything too objectionable in these philosophy papers, but sometimes there is. So it's like, I am not endorsing the crappy stuff. We are just looking at it to see what's good or bad, and we criticize if it's bad. And as always, at the end of the paper, we now review them. Anyone in chat is welcome to review. So this is Morality as a System of Hypothetical Imperatives by Philippa. Here we go. And as always, feel free to ask me questions along the way. It was my first time reading it too, or I may have read this, but not in recent memory. So yeah, I will do my best to explain what's going on, if at all possible. There are many difficulties and obscurities in Kant's moral philosophy, and few contemporary moralists will try to defend it all. Many, for instance, agree in rejecting Kant's derivation of duties from the mere form of law expressed in terms of a universally legislative will. I mean, okay, so from the just get-go here, this is this is actually a pretty clever start. You're saying, look, hey, there you go, Anti-Snowman, welcome in. It's like, hey, look, no one actually thinks Kant is sane. Like, what all the things he said, it's kind of insane. So no one's actually a Kantian. You can call yourself a Kantian, but you really mean you're a neo-Kantian. No one is gonna endorse all the things Kant said because Kant was a terrible racist, and for example. And so it's like, you just don't do that. But yeah, okay. Nevertheless, it is generally supposed, even by those who would not dream of calling themselves his followers, is what I mean. See, you see this? Like, hedging in clever ways. They would not even dream of calling themselves Kantians, and they would say that Kant established one thing beyond doubt, namely the necessity of distinguishing moral judgments from hypothetical imperatives. That moral judgments cannot be hypothetical imperatives has come to seem an unquestionable truth. It will be argued here that it is not. Alright, well, I don't even know what a hypothetical imperative is. If you do something, then you must something else, because a hypothetical is usually, if then, and an imperative, then you have to, an imperative. So, if this, then you must. So, a moral judgment is, right and wrong, but yeah. If you want this, then you must do this. Okay, yeah, see, thank you, K-Pars. But that's the thing. It's the hypothetical is the if-then structure, and then the imperative is the must. You're throwing a must in there as well. Yeah, rather than categorical imperative. The categorical one is just that you must do this at all times, because that's just the structure of the universe. As far as they call it a category, just one of the things that exists. It's a category, and it's an imperative, and that just means it's one of the things that exist, and it's an imperative that is just something you must do. So you must not murder, for example. Okay, in discussing so thoroughly Kantian a notion as that of the hypothetical imperative, one naturally begins by asking what Kant himself meant by a hypothetical imperative, and it may be useful to say a little about the idea of an imperative as this appears in Kant's works. Yeah, you must not lie, you must improve yourself. I was trying to think about some of the one of these a while back. I think you just can't treat yourself in a mediocre way. You have to at least try to treat yourself all right. If you try to treat yourself I'm not saying you have say you have a kink where you're getting beaten up. That's something different. But you shouldn't be just shooting for a crappy life for yourself. You should be trying to have a decent one. So the improve yourself, I don't know, or you must not lie, I don't know, but you have to have you have to at least think you're having a decent life. Therapeutic activity. Glad I finally catch the stream. I've seen you promo your streams forever in Professor Ashley's Discord. Yeah. Hey, welcome in. Yeah. Professor Ashley's cool. Unfortunately, it's my bedtime, but you've already given me less to think about. Hope you catch you in the future. Thanks for stopping by, Therapeutic Activity. Yeah. All my stuff is up on, if you want to just watch the VODs, it's all up on YouTube there, too. Yeah. Adam says, yeah, and Professor Ashley is really cool. I was just talking about gamifying academic philosophy, and so this is something I've thought about. Instead of playing video games on Twitch, I talk about academic shit on Twitch in the style of as if it were a game to be interacted with. So this is something I try to talk about. Adam says, should I think of it in terms of the old saying, ought implies can, or that implies something possible to do? No. The ought imply can is slightly different. This is saying, if you want something, then you must do something else. That has the if built into it. Ought implies can doesn't have an if built into it. It says, if you ought to do something, then it implies that you can do it. This is like just a plain if, there's no ought there. So it's like, this is more general, really, because the ought implies can says if you ought to do something, because it's if ought, like that's very specific structure, then you must be able to do it. This one just says if you want something, or like if something is the case, then you must do something else. So the antecedent, the if there, is much more open. Auntie says, I've only heard one lecture on Kant is the categorical imperative, the one where you don't do a morally wrong thing because it would be good if everyone did it. Yeah, that's basically it. Everyone should be doing something. If everyone should be acting in a certain way, then it would be the categorical imperative. It's like that should everyone do it. So if everyone was a murderer, then we would have a really rough time in this world. So no one should be a murderer, and then we'd have no murder, and theoretically that would be great. Did Diogenes improve himself? By what measure of improvement? He threw away the cup. Well, Diogenes got, I mean, it's a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek, I think, K-Pars, on your part. But, like, Diogenes then improved his self-sufficiency. That's exactly what he improved. Diogenes improved his self-sufficiency because he no longer needed the cup when he learned how to drink using his hands. So that was the improvement, he also could use cups, but he no longer needed to carry the cup with him, and he improved his self-sufficiency. That's one of the things I like about Cynic philosophy. There is a notion of improvement. You can improve your self-sufficiency. This is not one of those philosophies where everything stays the same. A lot of philosophies are like that. And like you're just trying to realize how much everything stays the same. No. In Cynic philosophy, there's definite improvement, and it's just hard. That's all. It's been a while since I read Foot's work. Yeah, I mean, classic stuff at this point. Is hedging really good? Aren't bold statements better? Depends what you're doing, Chocolate Mints. This is a very top-level philosopher. This is all set up. We are getting set up by Philippa Foot. That is what's happening here. So that's why she doesn't need to make bold statements to make her point. She's being more sophisticated. And I can just tell you that because of I already know the level of philosophy and writer she is. Was whatever. I don't know when she died, or I don't think she's still alive, but maybe she is. I apologize if she's alive, but this is more of a setup at this point. So is hedging really good? No, but when like it's like anything else, when like someone who knows what they're doing is like pulling it off, like they're pulling it off. That's all. Not just bad if everyone did it, leads to contradiction if everyone did it. Okay, Pars. Exactly what's the contradiction if everyone is a murderer? Like, there might be contraries. Like, it might be very, very, very bad for human life. But I'm not sure, like, if you want to go... Like, I mean, maybe that's what Kant thought. It'd be a contradiction, but maybe not in the modern sense. Strong sense of hook, a material implication. There you go, Adam. If everyone lied, stop making sense. Well, if you lied constantly, it would not make sense. Everyone could lie. But like not constantly. I mean, you'd have to, and that's true. If everyone lied all the time, like everything they said was false, then it wouldn't make sense to speak anymore. But like if everyone was a liar, that's not good either. I like that's a weird statement, because the idea is that you shouldn't be lying anyway, just not lying all the time. Like if you're lying all the time, yeah, then it wouldn't make any sense. My point there is more about whose notion of improvement. Okay, that's fair. K-Pars. Yeah, if you like your versatile, I'm not kind of just trying to explain. Yeah, that would make you a contrarian, but thank you, anti-snow. Yeah. Okay, so I think we've kind of gone over a few of the ideas getting thrown around at this point. All right. In writing about imperatives, Kant seems to be thinking at least as much of statements about what ought to be or should be done as of injunctions expressed in the imperative mood. He even describes an imperative as an imperative the assertion that it would be good to do or refrain from doing something, and explains that if for a will that does not always do something simply because it's presented to it as a good thing to do, this has the force of a command of reason. We may therefore think of Kant's imperatives as statements to the effect that something ought to be done or that it would be good to do it. Okay, yeah, so like, it would be good or it ought to be done. That's the sort of thing that Kant means by imperative. That's fair. Like, what is the force of the imperative? Well, it ought to be done, or it would be good to do it. That's nothing crazy. The distinction between hypothetical imperatives and categorical imperatives, which play so important a part in Kant's ethics, appears in characteristic form in the following passages from the Foundations of the Metaphysics of Morals. I think this is a quote. All imperatives command either hypothetically or categorically. The former present the practical necessity of a possible action as a means to achieving something else, which one desires, or which one may possibly desire. The categorical imperative would be one which presented as an action of itself objectively necessary, without regard to any other end. Yeah, so the do not murder because murder is bad, or do not murder because, like, well, we like that person. Like, we don't kill people we like, but so don't kill that person. So that would be a do not murder because murder is just objectively bad, or don't kill that specific person because, hey, that's our buddy. Exactly, chocolate mints. So it makes sense. For Kant, there's bad in themselves. There's no context that matters. And the other one is, context matters. It says if certain situation obtains, certain factors come about, then do something. For Kant, it's just no, murder is bad all the time. Okay. If the action is good only as a means to something else, the imperative is hypothetical. But if it is thought of as good in itself and hence as necessary in a will of which itself conforms to reason as the principle of this will, the imperative is categorical. Yeah, so just if it has like some inherent thing that like pulls on the will. So like just murder is bad and you know that. So there. There is no context in which the action would be good necessarily so. Yeah, I mean, for something like murder for Kant, yeah. Now, the question is, if you're still thinking about context, maybe Kant would have a problem with this. You don't even have to think about that. It would just be in a will of which itself conforms to reason. So this is just just in the reason by itself. Yeah. So, yeah. In the light of reason, yeah. So yeah, it's in the light of reason. That's it. That's like all like the necessary goods and the necessary evils that's in the light of reason alone. Those are the categorical ones. If you have to contextualize it, then it's not a categorical one. It's a hypothetical one. The weight of reason. What if you murdered a health insurance CEO? Yeah, exactly. So you see a lot of people online are not particularly sad about the health insurance CEO's death. I mean, yeah, that's how it is at the moment. I find the discussion online very hilarious at the moment. Like, one person dying in New York is it's gonna happen. The fact that everyone lost their mind about a rich person getting murdered in Manhattan, I find like completely ludicrous. But like, that's the whole point, is that it does seem for many people at the moment that it does matter who you're murdering. Like, they don't seem to mind that it was a health insurance CEO, whereas, when a kid gets shot for no good reason, then they do care. Like, that's not how it goes. So yeah, as always, I am not advocating violence here. I'm just discussing the situation. I am not and just in general, like, someone dies in New York. There's 20 million people in this area. Like, someone gonna die. Like, yeah, sorry. Okay. The hypothetical imperative, as Kant defines it, says only that the action is good to some purpose, and the purpose, he explains, may be possible or actual. Among imperatives related to actual purposes, Kant mentions rules of prudence, since he believes that all men necessarily desire their own happiness. Yeah, I mean, sure. Without committing ourselves to this view, it will be useful to follow Kant in classing together as hypothetical imperatives those telling a man what he ought to do because or if he wants something, and those telling him what he ought to do on grounds of self-interest. Yeah, so like, here's what you should want, or here's if you want this or that, what do you want? Like, these are different questions. Just because like you should want this yourself, or if you want these things. Like, that's different. Common opinion agrees with Kant in insisting that a moral man must accept a rule of duty, whatever his interests or desires. Yeah, so if you want something, then you should go for it. Like, all other things, like not being evil, Having given a rough description of the class of Kantian hypothetical imperatives, it may be useful to point to the heterogeneity within it. Sometimes what a man should do depends on his passing inclination, as when he wants his coffee hot and should warm the jug. Sometimes it depends on some long-term project when the feelings and inclinations of the moment are irrelevant. If one wants to be a respectable philosopher, one should get up in the mornings and do some work, though just at that moment when one should do it, the thought of being a respectable philosopher leaves one cold. It is true, nevertheless, to say of one at the moment that one wants to be a respectable philosopher, and that this can be the foundation of a desire-dependent hypothetical imperative. The term desire, as used in the original account of the hypothetical imperative, was meant as a grammatically convenient substitute for want, and was not meant to carry any implication of inclination rather than long-term aim or project. Yeah, so I mean, basically, what are you aiming for? Like, if there is a context to your discussion, to your whatever it is you want, then this is like hypothetical. There's a context and there's reasons that you're going for stuff. If all the reasons that you're going for stuff just are local to the concept itself, like has nothing to do with your life, then that's the categorical. But everything else, it can get complicated. Fair. Even the word project taken strictly introduces undesirable restrictions. If someone is devoted to his family or his country or to any cause, there are certain things he wants which may then be the basis of hypothetical imperatives without either inclinations or projects being quite what is in question. Hypothetical imperatives should already be appearing as extremely diverse. A further important distinction is between those that concern the individual and those that concern a group. The desires on which a hypothetical imperative is dependent may be those of one man, or may be taken for granted as belonging to a number of people engaged in some common project or sharing common aims. Ivan, what's up? How you doing, Ivan? Thank you for the raid. Skulkman says you should only pursue hypothetical imperatives consistent with categorical ones. Yeah. What's up, Globus? Welcome in, Ivan. Welcome in. 19. Yes, awesome. How you doing? 19. What's going on? What's going on? Sharing some common names here? Cool. Yeah, we are discussing some classic philosophy from Philippa Foot at the moment. Hi for everyone from Ivan Stream. I hope you had a good chat. Yeah, Merca. Shout out. Give Ivan a shout out. Yeah. So classic ethics paper. We're talking about design. We're talking about what are we talking about? Morality is a system of hypothetical imperatives, not necessarily the Kantian like laws. So yeah. Yeah, for the Foot developed the trolley problem. Yeah, exactly. I forgot about that. Yeah, this is Philippa Foot. She did do the trolley problem. Yeah, for those who don't know, hi, I'm Noah, Noger, Nogre, Nogreo, whatever you want to call me. Just don't be a jerk about it. I'm a philosopher. We discuss philosophy here. So we read philosophy on Twitch and try to figure out what's going on. So, yeah, Ivan, I hope you had a good stream. What were you up to? If anyone doesn't know Ivan, he streams like science chat, a little philosophy of science, some rationality, Bayesianism, evolutionary philosophy, yeah, evolutionary biology, things sciencey and philosophy and rationality based. So give him a follow. Yeah, she is a big deal. What's up, Unreal Brian? Yeah, so this is classic paper from like the 70s, I believe. So. Yep. Welcome in. And as always, if you have to raid and run, feel free to skedaddle out of here, Ivan. Adam tuned in, not Ivan. Adam tuned in, says she's teasing the meaning of hypothetical imperative, giving her take. It's not as clear as one thought Kant had defined it. Yeah. So she's making everything. What's going on here is like, look, there are things you might think are just like moral rules, like murder is wrong, but everything else that has context to it, where you have to think, well, in certain times you can kill people, like say war, and other times you can't, like murder, then if there's context, that's a hypothetical one, because you're like, well, what is the situation? If you're in a war, then you can kill people. Or if this person's been convicted of like a grievous crime in this country and we have capital punishment, then you can kill them. So all these things are complicated once you start putting in these hypotheticals, if some context is the case. And she was just saying, look, if you're in a group, then all of a sudden there's group choices. If you're in a country, then there's like country-wide nationalistic choices. It gets messy. We had a failed raid. Some people did not end up here. Another Twitch bug. Yeah, well, it happens. It happens quite a bit that Twitch is twitching. Philippa Foot is one of the group of women in Oxford who rehabilitated virtue ethics in the 20th century. Yeah, women out. Yeah. So this is basically what she's part of the restart of virtue ethics. So before this, basically you only had the Kantians, the deontologists, those people who are rule-based, and then you had the Humeans, the Mills, the Benthams of the world who are consequentialist-based. And so now the fact that we have three big theories in the West, the Kantian deontologists, the consequentialist utilitarians, and the virtue ethicists, is mainly due to Philippa Foot and other people over at Oxford, as Unreal was saying. So yeah, so we're just trying to, at the moment, we're just laying out sort of the landscape of things that Kant was talking about. Adam says, if you're in a philosophy club, how do they agree on how to proceed and philosophize groupthink? Yes, exactly. Have I ever been in a philosophy club? I was in philosophy club as an undergrad. I was one of the organizers. Let me tell you how anything works in the real world. People who want to get something done, they just work on it and do it. Everyone else just follows along because everything, like, it's just herding cats. You can put things up to a vote, but someone already had to decide what the options were, how to get all that organized, and it's like, that's how things get done. Where do you place the sentimentalist? Predominantly Adam Smith, Hutchinson. God, I don't even know. Good question, Unreal Brian. That kind of makes sense. It would take some specific virtues to realize your hypotheticals. Yeah. Where would I put, like, sentimentalists? I don't even know. Like, I'd have to look it up at this point. Like, one of my, like, weak points is ethics. I'm not an ethicist. Like, you asked me about, like, if you remember, if you were here a few roulettes ago, we were talking about object-oriented ontology. I've read object-oriented ontology. This is some micro fucking theory in, like, contemporary literature about ontology. Do I know arcane ontology? Yes. You ask me about some ethics, I'm like, I don't remember my ethics. God damn it, I'm sorry. But, like, yeah, apologize on that. Like, Valpo was asking me about particularism before, and I was like, oh god, I've heard that once. It's like, I am closer to particularism than I'd like to be, but I'm not a particularist. So it's like, do I remember the sentimentalists? God, no, I don't. I should probably look that up, like, really fast. Like, we'll find out. What are the sentimentalists saying? Because now I want to know. Sentimentalists. It's a band. Let's see. Sentimentalism. See about that. Maybe better. The literature. Sentimental, in contrast with rationalism. Sentimentalism, intrinsic human capacity and to feel and how this leads to truth. So I would put this actually in a rule-based sort of thing. Sentimentalists contend that where the rational belief moral is found and like principles, these principles cannot adequately found in the empirical law nature of humans such as observing. Therefore, yeah. So it's an ethical intuitionism or humanism. Okay. That's something. I don't know, but it's something. TMS by Smith is the core text. All right. Virtue ethics, but a bit of their own thing. All right. Yeah. So would that be like a Peter Singer? Yeah. I don't think. No, Peter Singer, I think, is a deontologist. But if I had to guess, no. What am I saying? Utilitarian. I mean, I think there's a notion we'd be better off if this hadn't been disconnected from his economics. It's like at this point, like, I don't know. So I guess the sentimentalist is like, be like saying the primary virtues are the ones of empathy and sentiment, being able to, like, you know, have some sort of empathy with other peoples. Yeah, is the arch-utilitarian, exactly. I said that, I was like, I had Van Inwagen in mind at first. I was like, that's completely the wrong person. Like, completely the wrong person. Not even close to the right person. Streamer brain. It's real. So, yeah. This happens sometimes, like, where you find people that drill down on one part of, like, one of these major theories. You could say, like, they are just, like, arch virtue ethicists where the main virtue is empathy, or like some people who would be like, you know, there's only one real important category for like a rule-based following, everything else doesn't matter. And then it gets kind of hard to yeah, cage match of the Peters, yeah, exactly, that's what kind of screwed with me. And then it gets hard because sometimes at the sort of the details of their project, because they're so focused on one thing, that it will veer off from, like, you know, the prototypical, like, deontology or utilitarian or virtue ethic. I can't speak anymore. So yeah, this is just, you know, I'm looking at this from an argumentative perspective. What happens when you drill into, like, just one area of a philosophy? Weird things happen because, you know, it has to branch out, and it doesn't always branch out in the way you experience it or expect it to. Yeah, so what are we doing here? Where were we? Oh yeah, so if you're in a group, say you're in a group chat, like in Twitch, all of a sudden you may have different modes or goals or something or others that you want because you're in a community than by yourself. And all of a sudden, like, you're in Twitch chat as you are a part of Ivan's community, then that's what happens. You end up having to, you end up having your desires shifted along with the desires of the community. You want things for the group that you did not want for yourself, or would not have wanted for yourself. But anyway. Okay. Is Kant right to say that moral judgments are categorical, not hypothetical imperatives? Yeah, so are they of themselves, in themselves, for no other reason than, like, they just are that way? It may seem that he is, for we find in our language two different uses of the word, such as should and ought, apparently corresponding to Kant's hypothetical and categorical imperatives, and we find moral judgment on the categorical side. Suppose, for instance, we have advised a traveler that he should take a certain train, believing him to be journeying to his home. If we find that he has decided to go elsewhere, we will most likely have to take back what we said. The should will now be unsupported and in need of support. What are we doing? Unreal says it sounds right. I think the emphasis is rather different, though. For a Singer, sentience is the grounding condition for what matters ethically. And once that's established, the question of utility happens without referring further to that. Whereas with sentimentalism, you have an obligation to opening yourself to feeling the needs of others and responding to them. Yeah, so that's interesting. So it's like one of these things where, is it just being conscious, or is it consciousness with a kind of feeling that goes along with it? So, and what happens when you have like this sort of sentimental feeling? Like, do you feel for your dog or your cat, but do you feel for insects? Do you feel for fish? I don't know. Like, you might feel for the cutesy animals. What about an animal that's not cutesy? Like the old, what are you? I'm an otter. And what do? You do cutesy things with your hands. I swim on my back and do cutesy things with my hands. For all you old fuckers who remember the Dennis Leary. And what are you? You're a cow. Get in the truck. You're a baseball mitt. So, although cows are cute too. It's like that's, nowadays I think that's unfair. People like cows better than they used to. I'm a cow. I have rights. Shut up. You're a baseball mitt. Good old classic shitty 90s stuff. Okay. Continuing. Similarly, we must be prepared to withdraw our statement about what he should do if we find that the right of relation does not hold between the action and the end. That is, that it is either no way of getting what he wants or doing what he wants to do, or not the most eligible among possible means. Yeah, so all of a sudden, if you find out he wants something different, then you should tell him different stuff. Like, how do you get what you want? Well, do X, Y, Z. You want something else? Do A, B, C. The use of should and ought in moral context is, however, quite different. When we say that a man should do something and intend a moral judgment, we do not have to back up what we say by considerations about his interests and his desires. If no such connection can be found, the should need not be withdrawn. Yeah, so if I say you should not murder, I don't have to know anything about you. Just don't murder. Like, there is no context to it. Just full stop. It follows that the agent cannot rebut an assertion about what, morally speaking, he should do by showing that the action is not ancillary to his interests or desires. Without such a connection, the should does not stand unsupported and in need of support. The support that it requires is of another kind. Yeah. There is then one clear difference between moral judgments and the class of hypothetical imperatives so far discussed. In the latter, should is used hypothetically in the sense defined, and if Kant were merely drawing attention to this piece of linguistic usage, his point would be easily proved. But obviously Kant meant more than this. In describing moral judgments as non-hypothetical, that is, categorical imperatives, he is ascribing to them a special dignity and necessity which this usage cannot give. Modern philosophers follow Kant in talking, for example, about the unconditional requirement expressed in moral judgments. These tell us what we have to do, whether our interests or desires, and by their inescapability, they are distinguished from hypothetical imperatives. Yeah, so it doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter who you are. There is no context. There is no conditions. These are just what you have to do. That's why they are the way they are. Seems very important that way. The problem is to find proof for this further feature of moral judgments. Okay, that's interesting. Because you see what's just happened here. Philippa went and was being like, all right, all these different situations for hypothetical imperatives, and then you're supposed to say, well, the categorical imperatives are different. That's just how they are. And then she drops this line. The problem is to find proof for this further feature. The whole point of those things is there is no further proof. They're just supposed to be rock bottom morals. They're just supposed to be the way they are. And she's just like, no, what if we ask about what it is? So now, like, Kant would be like, no, you're just supposed to get it. And she's saying, well, I want proof. And he's saying, no, you're just supposed to get it. And she says, well, I just want proof. Like, well, what just happened right here? Very different way of thinking about the world. Kant says you can't ask about these. These are just at the bottom. She's like, well, I need a further explanation. Okay. If anyone fails to see the gap that has to be filled, it will be useful to point out to him that we find should used non-hypothetically in some non-moral statements to which no one attributes the special dignity and necessity conveyed by the description categorical imperative. Not asking is one of the imperatives. Yeah, kind of. You wouldn't characterize Kant quite as I am. Well, tell me why I'm wrong. You probably know better than me, because I avoid Kant like the plague. Like, because I'm kind of just reading this as Philippa is here, as far as I know. Kant is trying to say it needs in itself, and the in itself is the bottom of the reasoning. So if you can't get the in itself out of the bottom of it, like, you just have to like be like, okay, the moral imperative is like do not murder because you're just supposed to universalize it. I mean, yeah, that's fair. This is like, these are universalizable terms. So that's fair. I should have said like, okay, you have to make it so that these things can be universalized so that everyone has to act this way. That is not an explained thing. Now, this is a further criticism of Kant. How do you actually do that? That's not explained. How are we supposed to properly universalize? I don't know how to do that. Is getting to the bottom of the same as the philosopher's name a priori? No. A priori is kind of things that are assumed. And so things that are assumed, like prior to the fact, those are assumptions. And so that may be the bottom, but those may also just be assumptions. Okay. Unreal says, I would say that Kant claims his moral principles are established by what's necessary for cooperative functioning is what underlays a necessary condition. For instance, don't lie, because if you say, well, if I lie, so can everyone else, you undercut the communicative cooperation that makes the possibility of lying even possible. That's slightly Habermas-inflected reading, but I think that's legit. Yeah, see, I feel like we are looking back at Kant with the historical lens at this point. We are looking at this with more information. We're trying to give Kant more justification now. This is the Habermas-inflected, I'm just angry at Kant, so I just, I'm going to give a shitty reading of him anyway. So it's like, if everyone lies all the time, yes, that doesn't make any sense. But the whole point was like, well, it's supposed to be universalizable. Why? What does that mean? And you're giving the Habermas inflected, well, there's a social reason there. The social reason shouldn't be a justification for Kant. Like, it shouldn't. Like, if you're starting to say, well, society collapses if everyone starts acting like assholes, well, that's not a categorical imperative anymore. That's saying, well, we like our society. And I think that's part of Philippa Foot's complaint here, is that if you start doing that, then it's all hypothetical imperatives and not categorical imperatives, things in themselves. Like, the murder should just be heinous in itself. If everyone murdered, then it would just be the death to morality. It wouldn't be the death to society. If you're worried about our society or civilization, then it feels like you have then given a further justification beyond the ethics. And I don't think that's what he wanted. Capar says, synthetic a priori positions, true propositions verifiable without experience. Synthetic to, I can't spell yet. But I think Kant abandons the idea of synthetic a priori proposition, the critique per pure reason. He himself had many phases of his thought. Yeah. Well, I mean, the question of what it is to be a priori synthetic or non-synthetic, just like straight up, just like something that should be immediately true versus something that you can reason about. Like so you can be like, well, how do you, like, does 2 plus 5 equal 7? And you can reason about that, and like, yeah, you have to put that together and be like, oh, maybe I didn't realize 2 plus 5 equals 7. But then there's stuff like, does 1 equal 1, like an identity. So these are distinctions that you should be able to make without any thought, or even though 2 plus 5 equals 7, you can make that without any experience. You just have to understand the meanings of those things. But these are not the foundations. Like the question earlier, I guess, was getting to the bottom of it is not just a priori. These are things that are in the background that we assume, and that could be getting to the bottom of it, but these are just assumptions. Yeah. So you're saying this, Capars is saying, because you think Kant intends categorical imperatives to be a priori synthetic. You could be wrong. Yeah, I don't know enough about it to like speak for him there. I wouldn't be surprised if he wanted that, because he thought that the morals and the ethics are just supported. Like, you're supposed to just know that murder's bad. And so then you could maybe reason with that. Can something be ethical without context? Well, that's what's at a Globus. That is exactly what is at issue here. Kant thought so. And he, like, these guys are the poster child for this sort of thinking, because if you're a consequentialist, you're looking at the context, you're trying to say, well, what makes the best outcome? So they are context people. It's like, well, what are you supposed to do in this situation? Well, you have to figure out what the best outcome is, and that's why they're consequentialists. You look at the consequences. There's always a context for consequentialism. These people say yes. I mean, it's straight up, something can be ethical without context. You should always be, say, loving your parents or whatever. Like, Kant was sort of traditional about this. Like, just any sort of like platitude about like ethics that you might think, like, should you be, thinking the best of all humankind? It's like, yeah, sure. And that would be ethical without context, because you can always be thinking the best of something. It's not very helpful, though. Adam says, I believe Foot's move is to deny the categorical imperatives as non-contingent choice for action. I think that's where we're going to. And also, we should be shouting out the Globus. Anyone who doesn't know Globus, you should go follow Globus. Globus does a lot of AI and tech news and discusses it, and frankly, this is what our society needs at the moment. Globus is doing God's work. This is like, if you want something without context, go follow Globus. You don't need context. You should just be following Globus and watching Globus content. My brain is gone. I don't understand it sometimes. But the whole point here is that there's an end to the discussion for the categorical imperatives. They just are whatever it is, the categorical imperative is the backstop, like, such that these rules, like these imperatives, should be for all people no context. That's the backstop. Whatever further story you want to give there, fine, but like it can't really be very much more than that. This is the full backstop, and she's saying, well, why is this the backstop? And she's asking. All right. And so now she's going to muddy the waters a little. She's saying, well, there's other things that you treat this way when you talk about this, but they aren't the full backstop. All right, there are more explanations. She says, for instance, we find this non-hypothetical use of should in sentences enunciating rules of etiquette as, for example, that an invitation in the third person should be answered in the third person, where the rule does not fail to apply to someone who has his own good reasons for ignoring this piece of nonsense, or simply does not care about what, from the point of view of etiquette, he should do. The fuck does that even mean? So it's like you should reply, like Dan should apply, or no, someone should apply. GPT says, yes, Kant did intend to be a priori synthetic. Okay, I don't quite trust GPT quite often with philosophy, but for something like that, actually it would make sense because it would be something in the literature well enough. But okay, but that's the whole point, is that these are supposed to just be immediate things of recognition. You should just know that murder is wrong, and so then you can reason with that once you understand the meaning of murder, that is. Adam says, getting a request for party, reply back with, no, I'm not coming. Yes, I'm bringing myself and my wife. Okay. But it's like, you should do that, I guess. Yeah. But like, yeah, so like you're enunciating the rules of etiquette, which I find interesting. So it's like, you should be acting in a certain way. And it's like, well, okay, you should be acting in this way all the time, I guess, but that wouldn't be a moral rule then, just because it's etiquette. I'm not sure if this makes sense, but like, okay, if you say etiquette doesn't really count as ethical, you're just trying to like talk about how to respond to an invitation, then yeah, that's a universal should that makes no, like, it's just very silly. Okay, then it makes some sense. Similarly, there is a non-hypothetical use of should in context where something like a club rule is in question. The club secretary who has told a member that he should not bring ladies into the smoking room does not say, sorry, I was mistaken, when informed that this member is resigning tomorrow and cares nothing about his reputation in the club. Lacking a connection with the agent's desires or interests, this should does not stand unsupported and in need of support. It requires only the backing of the rule. The use of should is therefore non-hypothetical in the sense defined. Okay, so it's just like there is something there, and it's stupid. It's like a stupid rule, but there is something there, and the rule is universal. That's the whole point. It's a universal rule. Okay, it follows that if a hypothetical use of should gives a hypothetical imperative, a non-hypothetical use of should a categorical imperative, then a should statements based on rules of etiquette or rules of a club are categorical imperatives. Yeah, so you can define rules that are just universalized. I spent some quality time with the groundworkers of the metaphysics model some 25 plus years ago. Damn, I'm old. Yeah, well, I'm getting there too, my friend. I'm getting there too. Yeah. Okay. Like, I'm just trying to think, like, what are the justifications for the categorical imperatives? But, like, they have to stop somewhere. And I think that's the only thing Philippa needs for this argument, is that they have to stop somewhere, and they're supposed to stop in something significant, like ethically significant, and the problem is just arbitrary rules can be also stopping points. And that's all she needs here is like, well, if some of them are arbitrary, then how do you know the rest of them have any moral weight, that have any moral grounding? So I will say this is one of the reasons I don't like Kantian ethics, is this universalized sort of thing, that they have no context. Things tend to be more complicated than universal rules, because how do you apply stuff without any reference to context? I don't even know how it gets applied correctly. So this is one of my old complaints about the Kantian system. Okay, since this would not be accepted, and to put it in the just because we have Globus here, it's the same thing as the 3 laws from iRobot or whatever. Laws can be bent and broken. Same thing. I was just watching The Matrix again. Laws can be bent. Some of them can be broken. And how that happens is how you get bad people doing bad things using like legal systems and using rule-based systems is you can get a lot of bad stuff out of these rule-based systems if you're willing to bend the rules and sometimes break them, because they are bendable and they do break even though they're not supposed to. The Yamaha DX7 is an a priori synth. That's good to know. Yeah. And sometimes I watch the music streamers there's like Synthon here, like a synth streamer group on Twitch. It's really cool. So they have like, like they have like Yamaha days or whatever. Like they have like specific synth. Everyone uses that one synth and like they have music. Or just the banality of evil that follow. But like, yeah, thank you for sticking around. Yeah, and then it dropped down. Everyone was like, yeah, fuck this guy. But yeah, what were we talking about? A little banality of evil. But like, yeah, I had nothing that clever to say. But the whole point is that like what we were discussing was arbitrary rules can also be completely without context, and they just can be universalizable. And so how do we tell the difference between an arbitrary rule and a categorical imperative that is supposed to have like moral weight? That's it. So yeah. So since this would not be accepted by defenders of the categorical imperatives in ethics, these arbitrary rules, who would insist that these other should statements give hypothetical imperatives, we must, oh no, stop that. Don't do that now. Okay. We must therefore ask what they mean when they say that you should answer. So we must therefore ask what they mean when they say that you should answer in the third person is a hypothetical imperative. Like, so yeah, what do they mean when I say my stupid arbitrary rule is not a categorical imperative? Very roughly, the idea seems to be that one may reasonably ask why anyone should bother about what should from the point of view of an etiquette be done, and that such considerations deserve no notice unless reason is shown. So although people give as their reason for doing something the fact that it is required by etiquette, we do not take this consideration as it in itself giving us a reason to act. Considerations of etiquette do not have any automatic reason giving force, and a man might be right if he denied that he had reason to do what's done. Yeah, so if you have just some silly rule and you ignore it, there's no big deal. Like, it's not a big deal. But like, if you ignore the rule do not murder, it seems like it is a big deal. But it can't be just based on this linguistic structure. That's all. I can see the moon now. That's cool. Moon's up there. This seems to take... Yeah, it's weird because there's a tree and like I keep getting little flashes of light. This seems to take us to the heart of the matter, for by contrast it is supposed that moral considerations necessarily give reasons for acting to any man. The difficulty is, of course, to defend this proposition, which is more often repeated than explained. Unless it is said implausibly that all should or ought statements give reasons for acting, which leaves the old problem of assigning a special category status to moral judgments, we must be told what it is that makes the moral should relevantly different from shoulds appearing in normative statements of other kinds. Yeah, so how do you distinguish out the moral ones from the non-moral ones? Attempts have sometimes been made to show that some kind of irrationality is involved in ignoring the should of morality. So this is the contradictions that we were talking about earlier. That like, okay, you're going to be like, if everyone lies, it would make no sense to even talk about lying anymore. But like, that's hard to do universally. So in saying immoral, so what? As one says, not comme il faut, so what? But as far, I don't even know what this French means. Sorry. But like, yeah, you can get the point. Like, if you just say, so what if it's immoral? No one says that. Like, you're supposed to, have some standards nowadays. But as far as I can see, these have all rested on some illegitimate assumption, as, for instance, thinking that the amoral man, who agrees that some piece of conduct is immoral, but takes no notice of that, is inconsistently disregarding a rule of conduct that he has accepted, or again, of thinking inconsistent to desire that others will not do what one proposes to do to them. Okay, or properly, okay. I see, as you should. Yeah, so, I mean, again, this is assuming everyone would act in the way that you think the morals were. So, the morals are. And so the idea that there wouldn't be any agreement or disagreement here makes this again, context dependent on you. So it's like, so people would say immoral. So what? Well, they might not say immoral somewhat. They might say, why can't I kill that guy? That guy sucks. You know, that would be the sort of thing. Like in a video game, like these are the choices you get to make all the time. I was watching someone play Stalker 2. They're having a great time, and they get these questions all the time. Should I kill this guy in the video game? Like, you know, and it's like, well, you get to like pick what side of the factions you're on in these video games. It's like, well, this is a sort of question that comes up, and it doesn't really, you can see how different people would make different rules. And so the idea that they're like saying, well, immorality, so what? Well, yes, but like if it comes down to like do not murder, it's like, well, in certain situations, like that's the whole point of video games, is you get to make these hard choices sometimes. And that's what makes the video games cool, is that it puts you in these situations where you are not always so sure what you're doing. Okay. The fact is that the man who rejects morality because he sees no reason to obey its rules can be convicted of villainy, but not of inconsistency. Yeah, so if like they don't care about killing people, they're not inconsistent. K-bars, even if you could universalize something without contradiction, like don't lie, you should probably lie to the Nazis when they ask if you've seen someone. Yeah, well, that's the classic example of like the Nazi at the door. Like they say, oh, did you see that Jew go by? And then there's the Nazi at the door. You're supposed to lie. Let the like poor innocent person go. And you know, these are the problems with these sort of contextless, universalized statements. You should never lie. And Kant sort of like tries to hedge around these, but you know, no one thinks it works. So. Yeah, so if someone doesn't give a shit about murder, it's like, well, they're not inconsistent. They may be a terrible person, but they're not inconsistent. Yeah. So if you're trying to find some other reason for what makes the justification of these universal laws hold, like consistency, well, then now you've got troubles again, because people will vary. All right. Nor will his action necessarily be irrational. Irrational actions are those in which a man in some way defeats his own purposes, doing what is calculated to be disadvantageous to, or to frustrate his ends. Immorality does not necessarily involve any such thing. Yeah, like you may be a terrible person and you get to be president of the United States. Like that happens all the time, apparently. Adam says it's grounded in Kantian rationality, either or this or that, and this is a thing which is necessarily defined, and necessarily it would not be like this. So therefore I would be logically mistaken to say that all humans should follow a rule that only applies to the group, like do not murder, and not to me, as if I'm not a human capable of that action. So you're necessarily either a human agent or not. You're not something in between based on context or desire or otherwise. Yeah, so this also has a lot of problems for Kant, because Kant only, ascribes rationality to like white European men. So, and like not even women, I don't think. So it's like, yeah, you can only be the right sort of person to understand this sort of thing. So it's a terrible, it's just horribly racist and like misogynistic. And so the idea that like only people who understand what this sort of universalized like ethics is, it's like only applies to like the fully rational white European man, is terrible. So it's like, yeah. Actually, I think more than call me a foe is a verb designating imperative tense of conjugation. It's a must. Okay. Yeah. I don't know what the saying, so I don't know anything about it. So yeah. So it's like, even though you're like saying it's grounded in Kantian morality, how do you even have any grasp on what that consists of? It's hard to say. Because like, as the example of Foot gives, what's going on with this? Sorry, there's like static in my ear. It's like, well, given the example that Foot gives, it's like, well, what if you have a defective person, basically, that doesn't mind murder? They can say, oh, everything would be fine, and they're not inconsistent, and it might even be good for them. Say Hub, what's up? People use categorical thinking in those imperatives to save time on thinking about it, saves energy, so to speak. That's fine. I mean, if you want to call these things heuristics, cool. Like, cool. But These people don't want to say that when they're basing morality on this. They want to say, no, this is the way it is. It's not just a heuristic to something else. They're saying this is the way it is, and like this is the morality full stop. And it's like, yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, Adam. Children too are off the hook. Yeah, you're not. I saw an argument. You're not like fully Kantian rational until like your mid-20s or like maybe early 30s. So it's like, all the like older white guys, they get to make all the decisions. Everyone else, fuck them. So yeah. Okay, it is obvious that the normative character of moral judgments does not guarantee its reason-giving force. Yeah, so you can't just look at these things and be like, oh, that one's telling me to do something because there's, you can't read it off the structure of whatever you're saying. Moral judgments are normative, but so are judgments of manners, statements of club rules, and many others. Why should the first provide reasons for acting as the others do not? In every case, it is because there is a background of teaching that the non-hypothetical should can be used. Behavior is required, not simply recommended, but the question remains as to why we should do what we are required to do. It is true that moral rules are often enforced much more strictly than the rules of etiquette, and our reluctance to press the non-hypothetical should of etiquette may be one reason why we think of the rules of etiquette as hypothetical imperatives. But are we then to say that there is nothing behind the idea that moral judgments are categorical imperatives, but the relative stringency of our moral teaching? Okay, so she's saying, look, we just put these in this area of like being categorical, but that's just a feature of how we've taught them, nothing else. Flip believes that this may have more to do with the matter than the defenders of the categorical imperative would like to admit. So she's just blaming this on history and education. For if we look at the kind of thing that is said in its defense, we may find ourselves puzzled about what the words can even mean unless we connect them with the feelings that this stringent teaching implants. People talk, for instance, about the blinding force of morality, but it is not clear what this means if not that we feel ourselves unable to escape. Indeed, the inescapability of moral requirements is often cited when they are being contrasted with hypothetical imperatives. Yeah, so, well, that's the idea. Like, you're just supposed to feel. Yeah, so maybe this is like the history of foot coming down in my education. You're just supposed to feel that murder is wrong, and that's it. And that's why if everyone did not murder, the world would be a better place. But what is that? Just the fact that we feel like murder is wrong? What more is there? And if there is more to it, it's not given by the Kantian system. No one, it is said, escapes the requirements of ethics by having or not having particular interests or desires. Taken in one way, this only reiterates the contrast between the should of morality and the hypothetical should, and once more places morality alongside of etiquette. Both are inescapable in that behavior does not cease to offend against either morality or etiquette because the agent is indifferent to their purposes and to the disapproval he will incur by flouting them. Yeah, so if I do something inappropriate, who gives a fuck? But like if I murder someone, everyone seems to lose their shit. What's it called? It's the old Joker meme. You break one little rule of morality, everyone loses their shit. But like, you can break all these rules of etiquette, but what's the difference? What's the difference there? Like, what is it? Like teaching someone 2 + 2 for the first time, but math is supposed to be difficult. Why try? Categorical imperative right there, yeah. But see, there's something supposed to be more like the 2 + 2 about the imperatives in Kant's system. Like someone was looking that up earlier. That it's just supposed to be that obvious that 2 + 2 = 4, that murder is wrong. But, we've gone beyond this sort of thinking. We have done a lot of work to show how the mathematic works beyond just 2 + 2. So stuff like that. So yeah. Yeah, so, but like she's saying, look, maybe this is all, it's just been drilled into us so many times. It's not actually that we care so much. Don't murder people is not good, but it's hard keeping them alive. Yeah, another categorical imperative's cousin, yeah. Well, that's the old, you're pro-life, but then as soon as, but like then no food programs for kids. Like, well, yeah. Of course, we must try other ways of expressing the fugitive thought. It may be said, for instance, that moral judgments have a kind of necessity since they tell us what we must do or have to do, whatever our interests and desires. In the sense of this is, again, obscure. Yeah, like why must we do anything just because we feel it? Sometimes when we use such expressions, we are referring to physical or mental compulsion. A man has to go along if he is pulled by strong men, and he has to give in if tortured beyond endurance. But it is only in the absence of such conditions that moral judgments apply. Yeah, so you're not being coerced into being moral. I mean, there's the question of, if you feel so much guilt that you must do something if you break some moral law, but that's just like sort of internalizing the psychologizing, the ethics. Again, could just be a question of indoctrination. Another and more common sense of the word is found in sentences such as, I caught a bad cold and had to stay in bed. Oh, that's Catholicism? Yeah, I was actually thinking of Dostoevsky, but sure. that too, K-Pars. I caught a bad cold and had to stay in bed, where a penalty for acting otherwise is in the offing. Yeah, so like if you are not allowed, like if you work in like say a hospital and you're sick, you have to stay home. But like, you still have to stay in bed. But like, yeah, you have to not go into work that day. The necessity of acting morally is not, however, supposed to depend on such penalties. Another range of examples, not necessarily having to do with penalties, is found where there is an unquestioned acceptance of some project or role, as when a nurse tells us that she has to make her rounds at a certain time, or we say that we have to run for a certain train. But these two are irrelevant in the present context, since the acceptance condition can always be revoked. Yeah. Hub says, so things become moral when you can use your frontal lobe, the rational and the critical aspects to make critical decisions and complexities forecast in time. Good is highlighted when it is apparent the acquisition of this behavior object can rationally enrich. Well, that seems very consequentialist, and we're not talking about that here. It's like what do you mean by rationally enrich? That seems like a positive consequence. And that we are talking about Kantian philosophy here, which does not deal with consequences. So I don't think that's what's, you can hold that position, of course, Ahab, but I don't think that's what is going on here. You need to be able to just be like categorical imperative, stop. And like, if you give more reason to the categorical imperative, as was, Unreal was doing earlier, I think that's it, maybe in the Kantian spirit, but that is not what Kant himself said. He was not further justifying it based on context, which is say it would be good for society, because then it would be a hypothetical. Like, if it's good for society, then you should do it. Yeah. So yeah, it's like if you catch a cold and you have to stay in bed, like, well, you caught the cold and like, so you have to do certain things. But like, again, if it rationally enriches, then you should do something. That's not what is at stake in this paper. Like, that's not what Philippa Foot is talking about, at least. Okay. No doubt it will be suggested that it is in some other sense of the words have to or must that one has to or must do what morality demands. But why should one insist that there must be such a sense when it proves so difficult to say what it is? Suppose that what we take for a puzzling thought were really no thought at all, but only the reflection of our feelings about morality. Perhaps it makes no sense to say that we have to submit to the moral law, or that morality is inescapable in some way, for just as one may feel as if one is falling without believing that one is moving downward, so one may feel as if one has to do what is morally required without believing oneself to be under physical or psychological compulsion, or about to incur penalty if one does not comply. Ramondo, what's up? Can't believe that it is not possible to foresee the consequences of action, so Kantian ethics is based on duty and not on consequences. Kant defended a deontological ethic, which values duty over consequences for him. Good should be pursued even if no reward was obtained in return. Yeah. What do you mean by moral rape? I don't get that, say Hub. Yeah, like what Raymond said. I think that's right. Like, he did not like consequences. He wanted these things to be universal laws that you could just follow. That's it. So you had a duty to follow the law. That's it. Yeah. So, but I mean, again, Foot is asking what is backing the idea that these are the specific laws to follow. Because if there are other laws that you could be following or other laws that aren't ethical, then why are you choosing these laws to be ethical? Say says duty is abstract, just do it because it's your duty. 2 plus 2 will always be. Yeah, well, that's a criticism. That's a fine criticism. You don't have to like deontological ethics. Just you have to know that this is what a lot of people do believe, though. And so it's like, if you disagree, that's fine. But like, yeah, it's a different system. Okay. No one thinks that if the word falling is used in a statement reporting one's sensations, it must be used in a special sense. But this kind of mistake may be involved in looking for the special sense in which one has to do what morality demands. There is no difficulty about the idea that we feel we have to behave morally, and given the psychological conditions of the learning of moral behavior, it is natural that we should... Thanks for the follow. Should have such feelings. What we cannot do is quote them in support of the doctrine of the categorical imperative. It seems then that insofar it is backed up by the statements to the effect that the moral is inescapable or that we do have to do what is moral required of us, it is uncertain whether the doctrine of the categorical imperative even makes sense. Whoa, your braining. Raymond says, a Spanish philosopher once said, quote, there's a very funny way to test this, commit murder and see what happens. That's fair. Like, people come after you when you commit murder. Like, they do. Point in case, the guy who shot the dude in Midtown Manhattan. There's like the whole world, like all of the US seems to be in uproar going after him. If morality was just a personal thing, maybe people wouldn't care if the murderer was caught. Like, maybe. Because a family's investment just dropped its stock into trash. Yeah. So that's part of it too. People were like, oh my God, the CEO died. What happened to the stock price on that day? It went up. Yeah. So that's the issue here. That's exactly the thing. Philippa is pointing out that there is no way to try to rescue the categorical imperative from context. There's always going to be something that is going to be in the neighborhood of these like moral statements that are just like the moral statements, but are not moral statements. But morality isn't only personally, it's human, right? Again, depends on what theory you are using, Valis. If you are a Kantian, these are just universal like truths. And so they're not really human, they are just universal truths. Yeah, management value subtract. Yeah, so it's one less fee that they one less salary that they have to pay that year. So yeah. So that's the whole point, is that these things are contextless in the Kantian system. Because the golden rule, bruh, someone got murdered, you might be next, do you want to be murdered? Well, that is closer to what Kant says. That says, I mean, that's like saying, well, look, if this were everyone to do it, would that be good for like life or like whatever it is? Like, how would we all get by if everyone were to do this? And like I said, I don't want to like make this into a societal thing, because Unreal was saying that earlier, but I was like, that's not kind of what Kant did. He said, like, should everyone be murderers? It's like, well, yeah. No, because it like then society, like not society would collapse, but like it doesn't, like, you can't see like civilization or like whatever grand project in humanity. You can't do that. So it's like, you don't want to be murdered, but that doesn't matter in the individual. One person can get away with murder. It happens all the time. And it's like, well, and then we justify other killings. Like, other killings are seemingly justified. Like, we have capital punishment here in the United States of America, depending on what state you're in. So it's like killings are justified under certain conditions. So it's not like, it's so clear. Just like, okay, that's all. Rational golden rule, what has gone around so far equals life. There is reason in the baseline. Yeah, sure, but like, that's not very specific. Like how that you're going to have trouble making a full morality out of that. And just because it's happened in the past doesn't make it good either. Let's consider culture as Kant did, the end of nature, and an intermediate step towards morality. He considered that culture was an intermediate step toward morality, thought that happiness was a natural appetite that should be limited to and subordinate to morality. He distinguished between your moral and pragmatic motives that lead people. He considered that actions only have value if they are moral. He considered that society and persons are inseparable. He thought that the human being is free and capable of rational self-determination on the moral plane. So, well, yes, Valis, that's universal code, that's right. So this is the whole thing Raymond is laying it out for us. It's that, like, you're not looking at our particular society, you're looking at, like, humanity as a whole. Could all of humanity act this way? And so that's the thing, it's a universal code. It can't be bogged down by particulars, is what Philippa is saying in this essay. So, and it's like, if you do try to... But, like, that's the whole point, is that if you try to identify any universalized moral code or this sort of, like, not, like, this separating out of morals and, like, pragmatic reasoning, you're going to find that it's not so easy to demarcate that line. The demarcation of morals and non-moral imperatives, you're going to have trouble. And that's her point. Yeah. Yeah, so this is kind of telling right here. It is uncertain whether the doctrine of the categorical imperative even makes sense. There's an uncertainty that she's added is really what's going on here. So, like, there's an uncertainty to the rules. Like, you just don't know when to apply them. And so, like, does it even make sense? Yeah, see, and this is what I was saying earlier, Raymond. I don't know if you were here, but, like, where you say the most obvious meaning of culture that we find in Kant is that of perfection of the human nature. So, but, like, if you're talking about perfections, again, that's contextless. There's no context. There's no specifics about that. And that makes it very abstract. You know, Stoic-like, I don't know if that, I can't speak to that. I don't know what Kant's thought of the perfection of human nature is, but yes, it could be. But, like, if there is any perfection there, then again, that has very little to do with our day-to-day reality. This is why I don't like Kantianism. It's too abstract for most stuff for me. Okay, the conclusion we should draw is that moral judgments have no better claim to be categorical imperatives than do statements about matters of etiquette. I actually think matters of etiquette are moral, so... think this is very funny. This whole essay is very funny to me. I'm with her on this though, but it's just very funny because I include matters of etiquette. People may indeed follow either morality or etiquette without asking why they should do so, but equally well they may not. They may ask for reasons and may reasonably refuse to follow either if reasons are not to be found. Yeah, so it's like, well, we could disagree on moral matters, and maybe we find out some of the things we thought were morally correct are not. Yeah, I agree, Valis. Etiquette is very moral. Yeah, I think that's important. It will be said that this way of viewing moral considerations must be totally destructive of morality, because no one could ever act morally unless he accepted such considerations as in themselves sufficient for reasons for action. Actions that are truly moral must be done for their own sake, because they are right, and not for some ulterior purpose. And this is the whole thing, is that they're supposed to give them reason in themselves and not for, like, society. You're shooting from the hip. I read the three critiques years ago. Well, don't worry. So have we all. Someone was saying they read this 25 years ago. So I don't, like, how many years is years ago for you? Someone was saying 25 earlier. So, and I've never read the full critiques either. I've only read pieces, like, because I don't like Kantian philosophy, so I never even bothered. I read what I needed to. How old is this thing? This is from the 70s, this paper. Well, in Valis, I mean, if you're talking about Immanuel Kant, that's hundreds of years old. So we're talking, this was written in the 70s, this piece here, but, like, this is critiquing the school of thought from Kant that's hundreds of years old. So yeah, reading only Kant for a year was torture? Yeah, no doubt. No one ever was, like, praising his writing. Okay. Is there anything to be said? Oh, yeah. So yeah, because they're right and not for some ulterior purpose. Yeah, they just have to be right by themselves. This argument we must examine with care, for the doctrine of the categorical imperative has owed much to its persuasion. Is there anything to be said for the thesis that a truly moral man acts out of respect for the moral law, or that he does what is morally right because it is morally right? That such propositions are not prima facie absurd depends on the fact that moral judgment concerns itself with a man's reason for acting as well as with what he does. Law and etiquette require only that certain things are left done or left undone, but no one is counted as charitable if he gives alms for the praise of men, and one who is honest only because it pays him to be honest does not have the virtue of honesty. But were you serving Kant? Yeah, no. Hey Valpo, how you doing? I hope the end of semester is treating you okay. But yeah. This kind of so we're reading the classic Philippa foot. This kind of consideration was crucial in shaping Kant's moral philosophy. He many times contrasted acting out of respect for the moral law with acting from an ulterior motive, and what is more, from one that is self-interested. In the early lectures on ethics, he gave the principle of truth-telling under a system of hypothetical imperatives as that of not lying if it harms one to lie. Hedonists don't seem to understand etiquette. Yeah, you saw that I was playing hits tonight. Yeah. I mean, this was, I think K-Par suggested this, so, I take suggestions, and K-Par's wanted the classic, so we did it. Adam says, I think Kant had a point about the practice of the good will, so when this will reflects on the rational aspects of the categorical imperative, practice alone brings one to the correct outcome. The logical conclusion is how you ought to act right. So, yes, this is the insight of Kant, was like, well, if you're doing it just because of the outcome, then you weren't doing it for the goodness itself. That's fair. Like, then the question becomes, well, can you ever actually separate out the altruism from the altruism from the benefits? And a lot of people don't think you can, and so it's a question, like, does it actually, can people just do good for the goodness themselves without actually, you can't feel good about it, you can't take any pride in the doing good, you just done good because it was the good thing, and that's it. So it gets messy, it gets very messy. But you can also see why, hey, look, you did all this good shit, but you were expecting something out of it too. So you don't really get praise for doing that. I mean, that's a very, you don't just praise people because they were doing their job. They were just doing their job. They're getting paid. So yeah. Well, Chocolate Mints, the action might be all that matters. Not in this system. You have to do the right action for the right way, in the right way, and be thinking about it in the right way. It's very psychologically heavy. And so if you are not acting out of the right, sort of categorical imperative, then you have not really done the right action. Other systems care less about that. Consequentialism, again, looking at the consequences, the action might be all that matters in that case. There are ways of forcing Kantianism and deontology into this. It's harder to make it work. You got to tick a lot of boxes. Well, other systems have to tick a lot of boxes too. They're just different boxes. And then virtue ethics, again, is different, because then it may matter what your virtue says, how you should be acting. It may not matter. Again, that's did you act correctly at the time because you were trained correctly? Did you have the right virtues? It may not matter what you were thinking about it. It may, again, or may not, in that case, matter. Good is nuanced in literally many ways. Yeah, that's fair. Adam agrees, for the sake of good. You're right, douchebag. You're not Jesus. Yeah. Well, I heard someone criticizing Kant a long time ago, saying basically this is just finding a non-religious way of justifying some sort of religious morality. And so if you're going to be religious, but you don't want to appeal to God, well, you say, well, there are these rules in themselves that are self-evident. And so you're just cutting God off. You're just saying, well, it's not God that gave us these rules. They're just self-evident. And then basically you can stick with your sort of God rule-based system. You just use Kant's. So, I mean, for what that's worth, maybe that's historically accurate. I don't know. But, like, you can see how this would be very appealing to someone who was in that sort of mindset and then was just like, oh, okay, I'm not appealing to God. I'm just saying these are self-evident. And then Philippa's here saying, look, you were trained to think they were self-evident. You don't actually think they're self-evident. If you try to identify their self-evidentiality, their self-evidentness, you fail. And that's what she's doing in this paper. Raymond says, we also have to think of that much of Kant rises from dialelo, the dialectic, which leads us to criticism of 2 plus 2, 4. Why? Because 4 is the sum of 2 plus 2. Yeah, so this, we were discussing the synthetic earlier as well. Like, does it follow from the definitions of these things? And that is supposed to be like, once you understand them, then you are supposed to be able to follow from the definitions certain consequences. That Y is 4 the way it is, well, it's 2 plus 2. You understand that if you understand the meaning of 4 and the meaning of 2 and plus and equals. So, like, you understand all these things. Is a circle that occurs in argument according to which one begins by admitting what is going to be demonstrated. Yeah. So, but like, this is the thing. You're laying out your assumptions and your definitions, and then it's just supposed to follow from that. But again, what is the self-evidentiality of murder? Like, have you begged the question, and why is this one so obvious compared to any of the others? And she gave examples, like some stupid rule book that no one really cares about, but if you set it up in the exact same way as a moral law, then how can you tell the difference between moral laws and stupid rule book? So, okay. In the Metaphysics of Morals, he says that ethics cannot start from the ends which a man may propose to himself, since these are all selfish. Yeah, so again, so you can't be doing it for selfish reasons. In the Critique of Practical Reason, he argues explicitly that when acting not out of respect for moral law, but on a material maxim, men do what they do for the sake of pleasure or happiness. Again, yeah, so there's some external thing. All material practical principles are, as such, of one and the same kind and belong under the general principle of self-love or one's own happiness. Kant, in fact, was a psychological hedonist in respect of all actions except those done for the sake of the moral law, and this faulty theory of human nature was one of the things preventing him from seeing that moral virtue might be compatible with the rejection of the categorical imperative. If we put this theory of human action aside and allow as ends the things that seem to be ends, the picture changes. It will surely be allowed that quite apart from thoughts of duty, a man may care about the suffering of others, having a sense of identification with them and wanting to help if he can. Of course, he must want not the reputation of charity, nor even a gratifying role helping others, but quite simply their good. If this is what he does care about, then he will be attached to the end proper to the virtue of charity, and a comparison with someone acting from ulterior motive, even a respectable ulterior motive, is out of place. Nor will the conformity of his actions to the rule of charity be merely contingent. Honest action may happen to further a man's career. Charitable actions do not happen to further the good of others. Yeah, so if you just like the idea of charity, you're going to be charitable. You are not doing it to further the good of others. You're doing it because you want to help your fellow persons. Yeah. Can a man accepting only hypothetical imperatives possess other virtues besides that of charity? Could he be just or honest? This problem is more complex because there is no one end related to such virtues as the good of others is related to charity. But what reason could there be for refusing to call a man a just man if he acted justly because he loved truth and liberty and wanted every man to be treated with a certain minimum respect? And why should the truly honest man not follow honesty for the sake of the good that honest dealings bring to men? Of course, the usual difficulties can be raised about the rare cases in which no good is foreseen from an individual act of honesty, but it is not evident that a man's desire could not give him reason to act honestly even here. He wants to live openly and in good faith with his neighbors. It is not all the same to him to lie and conceal. Yeah, I mean, it's like, look, why wouldn't you just be, if you think honest is good, you would be honest to be consistent. Like, that seems fine. Like, you want to be honest, you want to be known as honest. You don't need to be known that way, but like, that is part of like what you think it is to be an honest person, is to be consistently honest. And that's fair. Like, why would that be a problem? If one wants to know whether there could be a truly moral man who accepted moral principles as hypothetical rules of conduct, as many people accept rules of etiquette as hypothetical rules of conduct, one must consider the right kind of example. What's up, Adam Fighter? How you doing? A man who demanded that morality should be brought under the heading of self-interest would not be a good candidate, nor would anyone who was ready to be charitable or honest, or only so long as he felt inclined. A cause such as justice makes strenuous demands, but this is not peculiar to morality, and men are prepared to toil to achieve many ends not endorsed by morality. That they are prepared to fight so hard for moral ends, for example, for liberty and justice, depends on the fact that these are the kinds of ends that arouse devotion. To sacrifice a great deal for the sake of etiquette, one would need to be under the spell of emphatic ought. One could hardly be devoted to behaving as one should. Yeah. So it's like, yeah, are you just behaving because you think you should? But like, why would you be so devoted to that? But people they're saying, look, you get these ideas of like justice into your head and you want to fight for it. She's saying this is more a sociological thing. That's what's going on here in ethics. It's sociological, educational, and sociological. In spite of all that has been urged in favor of hypothetical imperatives in ethics, I am sure that many people will be unconvinced and will argue that one element essential to moral virtue is still missing. This missing feature is the recognition of a duty to adopt those ends which we have attributed to the moral man. We have said that he does care about others and about causes such as liberty and justice, that it is on this account that he will accept a system of morality. But what if he never cared about such things, or what if he ceased to care? Is it not the case that he ought to care? This is exactly what Kant would say, for though at times he sounds as if he thought that morality is not concerned with ends, at others he insists that the adoption of ends as such as the happiness of others is dictated by morality. Valis says, doesn't wanting to do the thing to fight for good make you a good person yourself? Probably. It looks like it's hard to say for Kant, though. You're doing it out of the sense of duty or out of like the categorical imperative, which says if like everyone in humanity did this, would humanity be better for it? Now that's a little bit different. It's like then you are following the moral rules. You've never heard etiquette as equivalent to morals. Well, Adam, this was kind of this is part of the setup. That's kind of the point, is that Philippa Foot here is saying, look, etiquette also operates very similar to morals, and people don't think of etiquette as, if you break a law of etiquette, they don't think of you as morally bad. Maybe a little rough around the edges, but they don't think of you as morally bad. And so that's part of the criticism here. Cryonics remembers this essay? Yeah. Well, no one here taking care of my needs, and this weed ain't gonna smoke itself, so it ought to be back. Have a good time, say Hub. Fighting also could be bad. Might be less destructive to accept whatever. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So this is the thing. It's like, well, if you're not going to accept laws in themselves for themselves, but then at other then maybe you should be taking on conditional things. Like the happiness of others is a good idea to take on. Like, that's what she's saying now. It's like, if you can't just justify it in itself, like, what's so wrong about taking on the happiness of others as your end? How bad is that? How is this, she continues, how is this proposition to be regarded by one who rejects all talk about the binding force of the moral law? He will agree that a moral man has moral ends and cannot be indifferent to matters such as suffering and injustice. Further, he will recognize in the statement that one ought to care about these things a correct application of the non-hypothetical moral ought by which society is apt to voice its demands. He will not, however, take the fact that he ought, in the M, to have a little m here, I don't know if you can see it, to have certain ends as in itself reason to adopt them here. You're just supposed to accept them. You're not supposed to do it for society. If he himself is a moral man, then he cares about such things, but not because he ought. If he is an amoral man, he may deny that he has any reason to trouble his head over this or any other moral demands. Of course, he may be mistaken, and his life as well as others' lives may be most sadly spoiled by his selfishness. But this is not what is urged by those who think they can close the matter by an emphatic use of ought. My argument is that they are relying on an illusion, as if trying to give the moral ought a magic force. Yeah, so it's like, how much can we pack into saying you ought to do these moral things? If someone just disagrees, well, then how do you actually classify the ones that they disagree about? Like, who are you to say what society should be? Are you a moral saint? Are you a moral saint, Immanuel Kant? Maben says, well, one can also refer in this sense to the creation of laws and rules such as judicial rules and ludic rules. Both perform their function as a rule, but one is obviously sanctioned in a more serious way. Well, that's her point here, is that you have etiquette, which doesn't seem to be sanctioned in the same serious way as moral, or like a game law, like as you said, ludic, like rules to a video game or whatever. But what's the difference then? Is it just what's the sanctioning? And she's saying the sanctioning has no great backing to it, no philosophical reasoning. So you need, if you can't make that claim, then who's to say what counts as moral versus etiquette versus ludic versus judicial or whatever? So that's the argument here. Okay, this conclusion may, as I said, appear dangerous and subversive of morality. We are apt to panic at the thought that we ourselves or other people might stop caring about the thing we do care about, and we feel that the categorical imperative gives us some control over the situation. But it is interesting that the people of Leningrad were not similarly struck by the thought that only the contingent fact that other citizens shared their loyalty and devotion to the city stood between them and the Germans during the terrible years of the siege. Perhaps we should be less troubled than we are by fear of defection from the moral cause. Perhaps we should even have less reason to fear it if people thought of themselves as volunteers banded together to fight for liberty and justice and against inhumanity and oppression. It is often felt, even if obscurely, that there is an element of deception in the official line about morality. And while some have been persuaded by talk about the authority of the moral law, others have turned away with the sense of distrust. Okay, classic paper. Yeah. Yeah, all right. So, as we do, we now rate the paper. So, thank you, K-Pars. Yeah, I always worry about discussing Kant. Like, I fear that, like, Unreal Brian knows Kant better than I do and probably was right in his criticism of me. But I don't know. Like, I get the sense, like, you can't, like, I think Foot is right. You just can't, keep pushing on, like, trying to find more rules in Kant's system. You have to stop somewhere. But anyway, this is our emote review. If you are in chat, you are welcome to use the emotes you see over here to review the paper. And you do have to spell and capitalize correctly. It's better TTV emotes, and then you can, like, you know, use like tab completion or whatever. But brain dance, if it was fun and brain dancing, and you made your brain dance, fun ideas, you use the brain dance. Nog scream for existential artistic drama. The Nagoro, the Ouroboros, is for deeper ancient ideas. Nog knife for slicing and dicing arguments. Nog navel for navel gazing, only for academics. Nog turd, all style no substance, still poop underneath. And Nog grapes for big claims that shrivel up. You can also use the global vote yay and vote nay of Twitch, and also my vote meh. Anything that's in the green will kind of, I have a number scheme that goes along with this, kind of makes the score go up. Anything in the red makes it go down, and the vote meh actually sort of pushes everything to the middle. So K-Pars gives it a knife, a brain dance, and a yay. So that's a pretty good paper then. So what will I say about this? Chocolate Mint says not brain dance, Ouroboros, knife, and a yay. Yeah, so this is, you know, this is a classic paper. In some sense, like, this already is getting respect from me. Like, it's like, I already know that people think this is important. Unreal Brian is more clearing the underbrush before doing the interesting stuff, but likely necessary. Yay. Okay, there we go. Appreciate the rating. It's like, yeah, this is, you know, the idea that, like, you can, like, sort of analyze the form. This is very 20th century. This sort of the form of the shoulds and how should is used in ordinary language. It's very I get this, like, sort of 20th century language, philosophy of language vibe out of this. This is what made philosophy of language the philosophy of language. Like, you could like look at the structure of how we talk about shoulds and oughts and be like, well, that makes Kant's system fail. So it's just like, I'm getting sort of like this is like what made 20th century philosophy of language and analytic philosophy what it was, this sort of paper. So there's yeah. So I'm gonna give this, let's see, we'll give it a nog knife for that reason. Yeah, brain dance too. It was fun. Oops, whoa, that was interesting. Give it a brain dance as well. Yeah. I'll think about other stuff, but if I was gonna criticize it, it's like, well, look, there might be a moral phenomenology, a way we look at the world that actually, we have like physical disgust when like we see terrible things. And it's like, well, Kant could have appealed, like he tried to do the categorical imperative. He could say, but look, there still could be defective people that don't really care about like dead bodies or whatever. Like, I find that sad. But like, yeah, again, with like and if you were gonna go into, like, we were discussing this in Ivan's a little few streams ago, like there was like aesthetics, like, not everyone finds the same things beautiful, but like people like this in these sort of like rule-based systems, there's like baselines. You're like defective if you like think murder is okay. And so it's like, well, maybe but like sometimes we do allow for killings. So yeah. Seems like less particular imperatives need more justification. Well, but that's the whole point, is that, yeah, some need more, some need less, but they all need some. Adam says, this is why later Kant moved the foundation of ethics to first either perfect man capable of thinking about these moral rules, and later changes to the kingdom of ends. Yeah, see, this is like, you have to get it like into these like perfections. Otherwise it doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. Alright, so as rational beings, they are to respect the dignity and autonomy of everyone in this kingdom of end, seeing each other as ends in themselves. Yeah. So again, this sort of perfection of seeing the world in some very, very abstract way, and not anything to do with like contemporary world, very hard. Leave your boy Kant alone. I'm sorry, I'm an anti-Kantian. I mean, I know people love him, but he ain't for me. So it's like, it's just very interesting, like this sort of thing. All right, so anyone else want to get their review in? Feel free to do it. Everyone, if like you're in chat and you don't see the emotes like below me, you can just copy the text that registers just the same. So you are all welcome. Everyone in chat right now is welcome to do it. You got 60 seconds left. So to get your review in, and then we'll be done for now. Thank you for reviewing, Adam. Appreciate it. Yeah, see, I'll fix the nog knife, but it needs to be a capital K in knife. You came in too late to review. What's up, MDD? How you been? That's fine. You're welcome. Well, as anyone who's here can do it. I don't know when you dip. Maybe a foot will suffice. Yeah, I do not capture a any emote that's not like on here. I do not capture. So I was like, but yeah. So a foot. But foot is fine for Philippa. But yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is just like, it's just really smart stuff. You go in, you look at all the different examples of like how the words are being used, and you be like, look, distinguishing this usage from that usage, you just can't do it. And so how are you going to give certain things the status of moral when you don't give it to the other ones? Kant's day job was professor of geography. He never left Königsberg. Yeah. Hey, whatever gets you paid nowadays. Back in his day, it wasn't easy to be a paid philosopher either. So, I think he was one of these people that he got paid based on how many kids were in his class. And so he had to, he was grinding. He was like on the hustle. And so like he had to hustle to keep his job. It wasn't like he had I don't think he had like whatever tenure was back in the day for him. So it was hard.